Today on Retire Right, we're talking about all your questions. We get questions from our Retire Right Facebook group. So if you do put a question up in the Facebook group, if we do share it on the podcast, we'll just use your first name because Facebook's pretty much a public place. If you do put it up and you don't want us to mention your name, if we do grab it and discuss it, you can just put, if you discuss on the podcast, please put anonymous. We can do that as well. And if you haven't joined the Retire Right Facebook group yet, when you go in and when it says, where did you hear about us or the group, just put episode, 319, just so we know that you're not spam or a scammer, because we don't like them, do we, Martin?
We live in that world now.
So I'm joined by Martin McGrath today from Financial Edge Group. Martin, are you ready to do a podcast?
Let's dive in.
All right.
This is a podcast that will help you plan and execute one of the biggest moments in your life. That's retirement. You'll learn how to set up your finances in a way that benefits you, your lifestyle goals, and keeps you in the know within this complex world of money and investing. Your host is Glen James, former financial advisor, author, and host of the popular Money, Money, Money podcast. Glen is joined by experts in various fields around the topic of retirement in Australia. Any advice in this podcast is of a general nature. Full details are in the show notes of this episode. You only retire once, so make sure you retire right.
Michaela, if you have two jobs, one casual and one part-time, can you resign from the casual job at 60 and meet a condition of release to access your super while still keeping the part-time role?
Yes. Next question.
Really? Interesting.
There you go.
Because I was actually going to say no. Next question. Before we talk to Michaela's question, let's set the scene with condition of release to access super.
Yep. So,
regardless of all the conditions of release.
Yeah. So, can you access your super when you're 20? Typically not, unless you've passed away or got a severe medical condition. So, when can you access super?
Or if you want to buy a boat during COVID.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Or if you want to get some
enhancements
done that are medically needed.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Otherwise, it's not 67 at the age pension as the rules as they stand today. Access to super starts from the age of 60, but it's not automatically, here's your birthday card, here's your super. You need to meet what's called a condition of release. There's a few different types. Today, we're talking about the one which is referred to as a ceasing a position of employment.
Okay. So with this getting money out of super, you do kind of have to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, because we've got a condition of release, which is the overarching thing. And as we said, a condition of release is that you medically can't work ever again or you're total and permanently disabled. It is financial hardship.
Yep.
It is preservation age.
Preservation age, I suppose reaching a certain age, which is the age of 65 now.
Yes.
Irrespective of work status.
Yes.
If you're the age of 65, you can start to access super.
Yep. Or what Michaela's talking about and what you just answered, being over 60 and ceasing
a position of employment. So, and that is the wording there. It's a bit more nerdy or technical, but that's kind of summarising it. So it's ceasing a position of employment. Different to retiring. There is actually another one which is retiring with the intention of less than 10 hours per week. This is ceasing a position of employment.
How long has that word been in there?
For a fair while now. It's kind of like, again, there's a few different ones under the bonnet. It depends on which box you end up ticking. And usually the preservation age, which has changed over time, etc., or the 65 is often the most common one. Retiring, I suppose, is often the next most common one. But this one is effectively that, okay, I still want to keep working and I'm not yet 65, but I'm over 60 and I've decided to, instead of working 5 days a week at a big corporate job, I'm going to change and work 2 days a week at a casual cafe down the road. I'm not retiring yet. I'm not 65, but I've ceased that position of employment and I've started another one. It's maybe a school teacher who's worked for 30-something or 40 years and decided I've had enough of all this, but I still want to be involved and help. I'm going to help tutor some kids a couple of days a week, that kind of thing. So it's perhaps still working, not retiring, not 65, but I've ceased that position of employment.
Because I always thought it was just a good rule of thumb to get money out of super, over 65, stop working. However, if you look at the legislation and the rules, it's a position of employment. So if we go back to Michaela's question, if you have 2 jobs, one casual and one part-time, can you resign from the casual job at 60 and meet a condition of release to access your super whilst
still
keeping
the other role? So that answer is yes. Now, importantly, some detail there. You cannot do it when you're 59 and 360 days. Okay, I quit last week when I was 59. No, it has to be at or over the age of 60. And then what the rules effectively is that you can access. Again, it gets more technical there. You don't have to take it out, but you send a form into your super fund. They will then change your components from being preserved to being non-preserved, unrestricted. Again, you don't have to take them all at that point in time, but they just move it from one column to another column. But importantly then, after that date, any future earnings and contributions, they keep being preserved.
Yes, because they're still going to...
You're still working again. But it basically is the day that you meet this condition, those benefits or entitlements get moved to the other column, but future entitlements don't. They continue to be preserved. And again, depends if you've got multiple super funds, because not every super fund, or if you only send the form to certain super funds, etc. So there's more detail than the initial just 3 letters I gave you of yes. But does the concept work? It does.
Okay, so I want to now really dig into some weeds of this. Number 1, Michaela is under age 67, so Centrelink's not even on the horizon.
Agreed, yep.
So we do not need to notify Centrelink of anything because not on the horizon. If Michaela did want to now access, she could have 700 grand in super. She's like, I want to stop my casual job.
Yep.
I'm going to gift 100 grand to a child to put towards their first home. By the time she's 67, it's been over 5 years. There's no issues with that type of gifting.
Yep.
If that was to happen. So I want to flag that for people.
Yep.
The process of doing it, because it's Centrelink's not involved, the tax office isn't involved. It's generally a self-declaration to your super fund trustee.
To the trustee. There's a form. Your super fund would have a form. It might be...
Could be an online declaration as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where this, I suppose, is somewhat a 2-step process. Step 1 is the declaration. I have met this condition of release and this is how I've met it. And the second bit is, well, okay, what do you want to do now? Do you want to take 20 grand out as a lump sum? Okay, well, usually it's part of that form on a withdrawal form. Do you want to take your whole balance out and pay your mortgage off? It's often on that form. Do I want to start an account-based pension and draw a regular amount out?
You took the words out of my mouth, because I think potentially with these type of questions, this is where a broader strategy enters the chat.
Yeah. What are we achieving here?
Yeah, what do we want to do? Because just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it could be the worst financial decision in the world to go, yes, I've ticked that box. I'm withdrawing all my super and buying an investment property in my own name with cash. Could be the worst financial
decision. Tax while I'm still working.
Could be the worst financial decision in the world.
Yeah.
Now, hypothetically, and this is where I don't want you to talk about this, Martin, because you're a professional. I just host a podcast. Michaela turned 60 last Thursday. Yeah, I was working at a cafe making coffee. Not doing that anymore. Send a letter in. Hi, I just want to let you know I'm resigning. Please don't give me any more shifts. I mean, because it's casual anyway, it's kind of here nor there. I'm resigning anyway. Awesome. Michaela goes to a super fund, and this is where it's the fund discretion. They may ask for some type of evidence. They might not. I've put forms in for clients before. Literally fill out the form, self-declaration, tick, I'm over age 65 and no longer, well, it doesn't matter, over age 65, tick, and they can see that, or I'm over age 60, I'm not working again. Your super fund might say, yep, sweet, show us some evidence. So you will need that, and it might even be an email from your employer saying, hi, Michaela, yes, we have received your notice. We will cease giving you shifts as at now.
Thanks for your 2 years of employment. They have ended on this date.
Michaela then rocks up, goes, I'm going to withdraw all my super, 500 grand worth. I'm going to buy a yacht. Happy days. Buys the yacht. A week later, Michaela could be like, oh, no, I kind of missed that bit of casual work. Could be 3 months later. She's still allowed to go back and resume a casual job.
Yes.
So we'll... But I just say that because it's pretty loose, because it's a trustee discretion thing.
Correct.
It's not tracked by the ATO and all this. So now I'm sure people have done things, misled forms with super funds in the past, and the trustees release the money. But I haven't seen ever, and I'm not saying break the law 100%, but I'm just saying because it's a trustee level, I haven't, and it may have happened, I haven't seen a trustee in the past do an investigation after the fact and sue the client, and I haven't seen that.
No.
But I have seen people retire and go, this ain't for me. I got to get back to work legitimately. So I have seen that.
I have not seen anything come back after the fact. I had someone reach out to me a couple of years ago. They were trying to access money from their super in this regard. They had and basically, long story short, they were trying to break the rules, etc. They work for themselves, or they knew the owner of the business and he was happy to sign any declaration and put a form in the super fund saying, hey, I've retired, etc., I've resigned. And the super fund denied it. And they came back and said, we can see that your work's putting $1,000.
That's right, it's super guarantee.
Super guarantee.
Yeah, so it can't be true.
And it's continuing.
Yeah.
They haven't told us you retired. And so
the fact that you're getting an SG contribution
from the same employer, the same amount, etc., which is, again, I think I've seen conversations on forums online and importantly, that's not Michaela's question, but other questions of, if you go from full-time to part-time with the same employer.
Yeah, that's not resigning from a position of employment.
You haven't ceased a position of employment. You might have got a new contract or whatever, but you're still with the same employer. If you're at Coles and you go from part-time to casual, you're still with the same employer. So even if your hours have changed, and I see that misinterpreted a few times. But yeah, and I have seen the case, and I said to this individual who reached out, I was like, I agree with the trustee of the super fund, because even though you and your boss have agreed that you're going to do this to get some money out, you haven't ceased.
Your dickery's been caught out.
Yeah. You could cease, but ceasing means pay out your leave entitlements, forfeit your sick leave, all of those kind of, if you're full-time, all of those entitlements, your long service leave, etc.
Your client, if they were doing dickery, they should have set up a new super fund for the other SG super.
I wouldn't encourage anything, but yeah, and client.
This is why and this is why I really want to be careful that I'm not saying mislead the trustee. I'm just showing people that this is a super fund level trustee discretion.
Exactly. Yeah. And just because one person's got away with their super fund doesn't mean you're going to or not.
Because your trustee might want some type of evidence.
Different evidence, yeah, exactly.
They may.
Yeah.
They might say, that's fine, but can we see your last tax return? They might. I don't know, because it is trustee discretion.
Yeah.
Okay, just on that, and this is the fascinating thing with these types of questions. You can talk about them and pick them apart. I'm going to say Michaela has 3 super funds of $100,000. Because it's trustee discretion, and we touched on this before, she could go to the one super fund and say, yep, I've resigned and all that, move the money from to the unrestricted non-preserved component.
Yep.
And then she can take that $100,000 whenever she wants, all day long.
Yep.
The question is, if she's like, oh, I think I do want to quit this casual job and see what this semi-retirement is like, I would probably encourage Michaela to do it to all 3 funds. So at least if she does go back to work next Thursday, she can't get the other $200,000 pots because
she's still employing.
I'm just saying, get the getting while the getting's good. Doesn't mean we access it, but if you legitimately are doing it for one fund, there's no harm, I think, to move the components from all 3 funds
I would agree.
to unrestricted, non-preserved.
I would agree. And then to add to that in 2 parts, once you've moved them then, even if you combine all those funds together, you keep those components when they move between. Back to that trustee discretion, fund number 2 might be where she's getting her part-time super put in.
Yep.
And they might go, hold on, we didn't even know about that cafe job. That's got nothing to do with that. So not saying she can't, but that's the exact example of they going, hold on, you're still getting this super guarantee from company A. She goes, yeah, but I quit job at company B. Now, she's still entitled and right, but she may then need to prove that they should kind of ask some extra questions. But I agree with you that she should still do that just to fully maximise it, because it's not impossible, but it is a lot harder if 2 years down the track and she's 63 and she said, I want a bit more. Hey, 2.5 years ago, I quit this cafe job for 2 weeks.
Yeah, they'll be like, that's cute.
That's too. We're not going to process that. It's too far gone.
In digging deeper a little bit more, you touched on combining the funds. What I'll do, I'll use the scenario. Michaela has 2 funds with $100,000. She resigns from the casual job. She tells one of the funds that I've resigned, so they move that component in the background to unrestricted, non-preserved. Friends, you'll never see these components on any statement because they're really just in the background. You might see the untaxed and the taxed and all that stuff, maybe. But if she does that to one fund, then she gets on with the life, doesn't do it to the other fund. Next week, she merges the 2 funds, so she's got one fund, either or, with the other one with 200,000. Half of her balance will be unrestricted, non-preserved, because when you roll over a super fund, when the super fund provides the exit statement, they say, here is the 100 grand balance as at today's date. Here's the component makeup. We've got taxed, unrestricted, non-preserved, or we've got taxed or taxable, preserved, or tax-free. So the components change. So does the eligible service date, which we might actually pivot to that and talk about that right after this.
If you're after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to retireright.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. Our panel of vetted financial advisors and mortgage brokers work with people all over Australia so they can connect with you wherever you are. That's retireright.com.au and click Get Help.
Okay, in part 2 of this question, I did mention eligible service date that also travels with each fund. And this is where kind of strategy can come into this. And I don't know, I'll just throw to you. So the eligible service date is the date that's on file when you first joined the workforce and super was getting paid to you.
Yep. Perfect.
So my one's probably
1842.
1961. So mine's going to be around the year 2000 when I got my first job or my first super account.
Super was paid.
So I've moved super funds over the years. I've now got a self-managed super fund. In the member details of Glen James in my super fund, it will have the eligible service date.
Yeah. Not from the day you set up that new fund, from the rollover that's come in.
Yes. Well, and that's what I just want to explain to people. One, how that works, because we talked about how if Michaela had 2 funds of 100 grand and she merged both of them, the components would follow and it would dilute the percentages.
Yep.
If one of them was an eligible service date of, 1993 and the other one was 1981, the date that's the oldest is the new date.
Yep.
So what is the significance of this date with super? I wanted to get you to answer the hard one. You like that? I just butted. I'm like, he can answer this on the disability and all this. And
Yeah, so
and he hasn't prepared for this.
Without preparation, there's two things that come to mind. There are some elements that are pre-1983 that refer to the taxable and the tax-free portions. So if you're retiring and you've got different points, there are some calculations of that even employer contributions before, I think it was a certain day, 1983 or whatever, Google will tell us that portion or a portion of that can be tax-free. So that is eligible potentially to all retirees, but only those that were in the workforce before that period of time. The other one that comes to mind that hopefully is less common but happens is certain disability or TPD payments, total and permanent disablement payments that get paid. They can be taxable, and there is a lovely calculation that depends upon your age at the claim, your eligible service date, and I think it's years to 65. That is super relevant and can increase or decrease the amount of tax payable on that TPD payment.
Okay, so just on that, I want to just explain a practical scenario of that, and I'll just use eligible service date, the year 2000.
Yep.
Okay. If I, at 2025, so we'll do the eligible service date of 1st of July 2000.
Mm-hmm.
On the 30th of June 2025, this year,
yep.
So 25 years in, I have an accident or an illness which deems me to be totally and permanent disabled.
Can't work again.
Can't work again. As at that date, the days between, if I just had $100,000 super balance, when they work out, okay, so Glen's TPD, so he's met a condition of release because he can't work ever again.
Yep.
So I'm 40 now I can take the $100,000 out tomorrow. In the background, in the super funds, which I mentioned before, you may see these on statements. Not all funds will, but there's tax components. So there's the
taxable and the tax-free and potentially untaxed as well if there's insurance proceeds.
Yeah. And this is where we've talked previously in previous weeks around the recontribution strategy and stuff like that. So basically what they say is, actually, can you just open ChatGPT for me?
Here we go.
We're doing this on the fly, everyone. Can you put 1st of July 2000 as the start date? Put are you there?
Yep.
Mid date is the 30th of June 2025. How many days from June 2025 to age 65 if my birthday is, and I'll just write this down so I don't say it publicly for my own ID, which any smart person will work it out anyway. Who cares? 24th of June, 84, whatever. I want Martin to work out the line in the sand of my accident this year, what the percentage components are between when I started work and when I was disabled and when I became
disabled
and age 65. And we'll put some background music on while
worries in my spare time.
ChatGPT is doing that.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah. Because this is why, because I want to get to some other planning considerations which are really important. And I've kind of called this episode Nerding Out on Super Components, and it's all been inspired. And this is why, while Martin's working this out, I'm just taking up some free air. This is why I'm such a big believer in professional financial advice, because you might see this stuff out there in Facebook land, but a good advisor, they will be aware of these highly technical components that are actually hidden in the background of the super fund. So, and this is all just stemmed from one question. There's literally one line. And this episode, we had 4 questions prepped to answer, but halfway through, I'm like, nah, we're going to keep digging on this. So that's kind of why I wanted to call this Nerding Out on Super Components. Okay, we're back. Now, we not knowingly walked over a landmine then, and we've just taken the last 15 minutes
Love playing around with some nerdy numbers.
To really look at the nerdy numbers because I think it's very interesting. So what we talked about was if I had $100,000 in super, I started in 2000, had a disability now, so 20 years into my working life, and they worked out the service date.
You were halfway through your work.
Yeah, and we'll just call it. I probably didn't realize how old I am when I said that. It's like halfway through. So I'm halfway through my working life. We'll call it 50-50. So what happens, and this has not got anything to do with insurance right now, if I just had $100,000 in my super fund.
Preservation we came from, about accessing money out of super.
Yep.
One of the preservations is I'm permanently retired, I can no longer continue to work. Sorry, not permanently. I'm permanently incapacitated, I can no longer continue to work. Can you access that money? Yes, you've met a preservation. But is that going to have a tax consequence? If you're under the age of 60, yes, it could potentially have a tax consequence.
So are we saying the taxable components in someone's super fund will trump the preservation components-ish?
They will sit alongside.
Right, okay.
So they will still sit there, and then your so I think the preservation trumps the tax.
One or another.
Yep.
Yeah. Or they basically both look at each other.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Even if you've got some tax-free elements, if it's preserved, you can't access it. You need it to move to the unrestricted non-preserved. Say, hey, I've had an accident, I can no longer work, contact your super fund. They say, no worries, we'll move it from preserved to unrestricted non-preserved. You haven't taken it out yet, but they've said you can now access this if you want. If you're retired over 60, it's tax-free. But if you're under 60, and even if you're not working and you're retired because you medically can't work or you're choosing not to work, it's not tax-free. There is a tax calculation.
And this is the crux of how do they work out that tax calculation, either side of that disability date?
Yeah. So we can either go and get an actuarial degree and figure that out, or we can use some high level. Basically, is they figure out how long of your work life have you worked and how long is your work life still to work. So let's call it 50-50. Half of the taxable portion, so in that case, 50% of your work life, will be taxable when you receive that under the age of 60. Now, there are some lump sum benefits, some fixed rates of tax, etc. But basically, before you withdraw it, they'll reassess it and go, hey, you put some contributions in here, it's earned some money, the taxable portion, we're going to do what's called an uplift and we're going to change it and reallocate it for you. And they look at your eligible service period start date, and they look at how long until you reach the age of 65. And so I'll throw it to you back to summarise is basically if your eligible start date is when you were 15 and got your first job, is going to be different to that calculation if you're got that new super fund 6 months before. You're going to have different eligible service period start dates.
And that's why if you do have multiple super funds, it's a consideration when merging them. Now, I would say as well, if you did have multiple super funds and you were currently incapacitated or potentially TPD'd or off work due to a major illness or medical condition or an accident, you do not want to be dicking around merging super funds, because if you need to make a claim, if you moved that or if you merge those super funds, it could cost you more in tax because you've dicked around with that service date up to the date of
the claim.
The claim, because it's really, if you had merged, the super funds can only look at the current components that you're claiming against. Like, I haven't seen them backdate and go, well, no, technically, because you had the accident or illness 3 years ago, we can't use the date. No, they're just going to use that eligible service date that they have got.
Yep, on file.
So very nerdy and technical. I guess in bringing home this components thing, what are some real-world strategies where maybe in estate planning someone might have, they might be under 65 or still being able to get money to super. They've got you their taxed, still preserved fund. They come into $100,000 or whatever. They might have a blended family. There could be a a strategic decision to set up a separate fund and make a non-concessional contribution to that fund.
With a different beneficiary named, and that could go tax-free then to that adult beneficiary.
Without diluting. Because if you did it and this is where you need to check with your advisor, if you did move money into a super fund, to withdraw money prior to, what am I saying here? We've got to make sure drawdowns, and I don't think they can do it at fund level. You can't tell the super fund just pull the money out of the.
Yeah, you can't pick your components.
That's what I'm saying.
It has to be. Yeah, and I mean to that point,
you can't pick your components.
I had a meeting yesterday, and I came up with this analogy, so I'll try it again now. Let's say your taxable component is the color blue, and your tax-free component is the color yellow. I'm not great with art and colors, but let's give this a go.
You're really not.
You keep them in separate pods or separate buckets. The blue's going to stay blue, the yellow's going to stay yellow. If you start merging your accounts together and I'm going to roll this super fund over with that super fund, it's got a lot of taxable, this one's got a lot of tax-free. You merge them together, the blue and the yellow are going to mix together. And Glenn, what color is that going to make?
Blue and yellow.
Yep.
Green.
Very good. So then now you're going to have this new super fund, colored green. And if you decide you want to take some money out, you can't say, I'll just take the blue bit out of the green. You're taking a bit of both.
Yeah.
So there are, for that reason, that planning, sometimes there are benefits to have separate super funds. And that analogy I came up with yesterday talking to a client. And in that case, we are going to do some pretty significant recontribution strategies. They have some high-level taxable components that they really want to minimise for their kids and et cetera. We're going to keep them in separate super funds. Yes, it might be an extra $10 a month in admin fees, and yes, you should try and save every dollar here and there. But they know that's going to be the cost. We'll disclaim that's going to be the cost of isolating these in two separate funds rather than one. But by keeping them separate, we can keep those tax components separate. And a consequence would be they'd have different eligible service period dates.
Yeah.
Which in this case for this retiree is not going to matter, but in other cases it definitely would matter.
My mind is just going, and I think we'll end on this because it's going to a bit more nerd out strategic vibe based on the eligible service period. If my $100,000 super fund had default group insurance in there of $500,000, we know that $500,000 just gets treated the same way as the 100.
Yep.
So you basically call it $600,000.
Yep.
Now, this is where you need to be strategic based on your situation. If you had a super policy of TBD insurance set up by a financial advisor that had its own super trustee, internally in that fund, the ESP starts the date that you open the account.
Fun, yeah.
So all that to say, while it might not be an issue, you will have greater flexibility to have any insurance away from the fund.
The main fund, yeah.
Because effectively now you've got two super funds. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that is fair.
And this is why, you just want ultimate flexibility. So, for example, if you had two super funds and a life/TBD policy of $500,000 set up with an advisor funded by one of the funds or your own money, it doesn't really matter. It's after the fact. So if you had two funds of $100,000 each and an insurance TBD policy of $500,000, if you had an accident or an illness and it looked like there might be a TBD claim, stop right there.
Yeah.
Like a client of mine, I set up an insurance policy in 2013. I still see them around. They recently had a TBD event and they had the super in one account with super provider and the insurance in another. And they did go to the advisor and, you can't roll an insurance policy over.
Yep.
But I want to illustrate that because they had ticked the box of condition of release at a super rules level, that pretty much automatically guaranteed that a claim would be paid with the TBD policy.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And I think, putting a button on this technical chit-chat, that's why specialist advice for some complexities is worth it.
Yeah.
So, in the industry, there are certain businesses that specialize with TPD claims.
Yeah.
Whether you've got insurance
Or not.
whether you've got 3 super funds with 100,000 in each one and there's TPD, don't just fill out a form and lodge a TPD claim with each fund. Just come up for air or don't go, I'll just merge them. You may, but we see this all the time with, moving on from ESPs, eligible service periods and the eligible service dates. We see people get caught out all the time with preservation, with taxable components.
Yep. Yeah,
So-
mixing things together or rolling over to save fees and you've lost insurance policies, etc. So, pausing sometimes and just having a quick look or a quick phone call can definitely be a benefit.
And just following that in the same vein, don't roll over and start your super fund pension account if it's in accumulation. If you need, what's that? What doesn't carry over, like the taxable contribution. So if you had to,
Before you want to claim intention to intent to claim.
Yes, okay, we got there.
Yeah.
Just talked about that. You've got 2 super funds. You manually put 20 grand into
Yeah. I read on a Facebook group that I can put 20 grand into super and offset my capital gain sale.
Yeah.
Can that work? Yes. I also read on a Facebook group you should consolidate your super funds to save on fees. Could that work? Yes.
Yes.
If you do those things both in the same week, that 20 grand you put into super, you're not going to get to claim that back on tax. What you need to do, so summarising that is, can you put money into super, claim back on tax? Yes. You put the money in. You then need to follow it with a form to the super fund.
Or an election online.
Or an election online. Yeah, a lot of them now can be online. I put 20,000 in. I want to claim that back on tax.
And then the super fund tweaks that internally.
It adjusts it. It takes out the tax. It tells the ATO. If then a week later you roll it from Fund B into Fund A, that's locked in.
All good.
All good. Good and bad. Because if you get to tax time and you go, actually, I don't need to claim that anymore. I can vary that, can't I? Yes, you can vary it, but not if you've already rolled it over. It's locked in. So often if you've had still Fund B, you could go back to them and go, hey, I put that 20,000 in my account, said I only need to claim 5,000 of it. I don't want to pay the extra 15% tax. You can still vary it. What you were hinting at more of the opposite of, I've done that, I've rolled it over, then my accountant says I need to claim the 20,000. I go back to Fund B, realise I closed that down, so I call Fund A and go, hey, last year I put 20 grand into that fund, I want to claim back on tax. They'll say, did you tell Fund B? No, I didn't. Well, you can't claim it now. It's already been rolled over. We see it, unfortunately, too often online or different kind of conversations. The strategy is there, but that's where the detail needs to line up with it.
Yeah, and online and on this podcast and in our Facebook group, you get all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle and the strategy. Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do all this. You'll do your ass if you put those puzzles together and
The wrong piece.
build it in the wrong order.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of tell people with, if you pay an advisor $7,000 for an advice fee, you're pretty much saying I'm paying you to ensure that I don't DIY and make a mistake that could cost $20,000 that actually is unreversible. Literally unreversible. So we'll leave it there. We got through one question.
Yeah, that's good.
There we go.
We've got a few left for next time then.
That's right. We'll be back in your ears before you know it. Thanks, Martin McGrath from Financial Edge Group. My name's Glen James, and see you soon.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you want to support us, there is one way you can do that. You can send the episode to a friend, a family member, or your group chat if you think those people would find it valuable. We also thank you for leaving a review on Apple or Spotify. If you've listened to this podcast for some time, or if you've read any of my books, you would know that giving and generosity in a financial sense is a big thing in my life. If you think it's time that you are ready to give financially to a good cause, you could head to our website, moneypodcast.com.au/charities to see the charities that we support.
Any advice is general financial advice only, which does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Because of that, you should consider if the advice is appropriate to you and your needs before acting on the information. If you do choose to buy a financial product, read the Product Disclosure Statement, PDS, and Target Market Determination, TMD, and obtain appropriate financial advice tailored to your needs. Simo Interactive Pty Ltd, trading as Retire Right Australia, and Glen James are authorised representatives of Money Sherpa Pty Ltd, which holds Financial Service Licence 451289. Martin McGrath, Financial Edge Group, and their employed financial advisors are authorised representatives of Synchron Advice AFSL 243313. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts or the publisher or their respective licence holders.